Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today we are talking about body composition. That is number 5 on the 5 keys of physical fitness. Also a very important one for us to learn about. Body composition, what is it? Body composition is the ratio of body fat compared to lean mass. Lean mass is our muscle, our water, our bones, etc. So lean mass is everything but body fat. Okay, so that's why we call it lean mass. It's not just muscle, but we tend to refer to it as fat compared to muscle. Okay, why do we need to know what our body composition is? Because our body functions and performs differently based on the body fat ratio. Someone that is 180 pounds might lose 30 pounds and then a year later gain it back. What is the most common, and you can find these stats just about anywhere, is that when someone loses 30 pounds, if they're not doing it, how do I want to say, if they're not doing it programmed on purpose, most of the time they are losing body muscle and keeping some body fat. Or if they had a fair amount of muscle, then they're losing fat and muscle. But if they gain that weight back in a year, okay, higher than 90% of the time, they're gaining body fat back. So if you've lost muscle when you lost that 30 pounds, and then you gain the 30 pounds back a year later, and you gain all fat back, you've now had a lot of lean mass loss. And therefore, the body will perform differently in many ways in life. It can also help us feel better about what the scale says by itself. A lot of people will step on the scale and they will not like that number, but they don't really know what their body fat to lean mass is. So for example, for me being at 160 pounds, sure, I could probably work on losing some body fat, but I know that I have a lot of lean mass in there, so I don't let the scale bother me so much. If you look at the charts in the doctor's office, they're going to say, based on your age and height, you should be at a certain weight range. That doesn't take into account for whether or not you have more muscle or less muscle or more fat, okay? So for example, you can have two similar people. They look a lot alike. They can both be 150 pounds, same height, same gender. One might be 20% fat and the other one might be 35% fat. So this can impact how we would program for you. Somebody that has 35% fat, we want to work on more of a fat loss program, whereas 20% fat, we might want to just maintain that lean mass, okay? There is a difference in there. How can we change your body composition? There are so many ways. Most of the people in our nation are doing it the wrong way by fad dieting or just plain dieting and not taking into account any of their other metrics. The best way to lose weight is to commit to losing body fat instead of just losing weight. Losing body fat is the most advantageous way of achieving a really healthy, vibrant feeling body, okay? So quite often these fad diets have us eating much less than we were used to eating, let alone it's usually much less than we actually need. And that is usually why people will lose weight on them. They just lose the weight. And what usually happens though when you have a short-term diet is it's a lot of water weight, okay? So this creates a situation where your body will turn to its own muscle for nutrients and fuel instead of using it from the food you eat. Okay, that's really important. There's a lot of complicated things in here, but I can promise you they are legit, and I've seen them occur over all of my years of training. Committing to losing body fat instead of just weight means planning a careful health and fitness plan for your specific body. That's really important. So knowing your body composition can help make that plan appropriate for you. Okay. What should my body composition be? This is a specific question for each individual, but there are charts that give us average percentages for being underweight, average weight, overweight, or obese, okay? Usually 20 to 30% is just your average risk of adverse health, okay? How can I get my body composition measured? The most common way today is a bioimpedance scale, and that is where you either hand hold an electronic device or a battery operated device maybe, or you stand on a scale that usually have little silver contacts. And what that does is it sends a signal through your cells, and depending on the speed of that signal, it tells you whether you have more lean mass or more body fat. Okay. And I personally believe that unless you're using a much more expensive model, such as ones that they have at the hospital, the other models that we can just buy off from a store that are $30, $40, maybe even $100, in my opinion, are not as accurate as they should be. I like to perform skinfold testing. I've been doing it for many, many years. I still like to do it. This is where I pinch and measure 7 to 8 spots on your body. And then I enter that into a chart which with your other biometrics, and that gives me back your benchmark or your body fat and your lean mass percentages. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes here and not miss any little tidbits. Anyway, I like to perform that because I can actually feel and pinch, and we know where you're losing body fat and where you're gaining body fat, because as you start to make changes in your routine, your body can, be in different places. And it just sort of helps me to know that if your scale went up, I can actually tell you if you gained muscle or if you gained body fat. So I really like being able to do that. There are also things called bod pods. They look like a little egg-shaped unit that you sit inside of. It uses air displacement to assess your body mass. From what I've heard and read, they're becoming pretty they have a pretty good accuracy. Nothing is 100% accurate. The most accurate, I believe, that is considered to be near maybe 99% accurate is a water displacement. So you'd have to go into a pool where they perform something like that. And then the next one down would be a DEXA scan. And those actually can be quite expensive, and they're not very common. One of the other things that I want to talk about in this section is the waist to hip ratio. That is a ratio that more and more doctors are using, and I think it's a really important one. I like to help people understand what their waist to hip ratio is, because this waist to hip ratio is a very good indicator to what kind of risk you are for heart disease and for type 2 diabetes specifically, but a lot of other chronic disease. It can help determine your risk factor. What I can tell you is that for females, if your waist is over 35 inches, you are at high risk. If you're a male and your waist is over 40 inches, you are into the high risk category. But when we perform this ratio, what it really means is when we compare our midsection size to our hips, that is an indicator of risk, health risk. So for example, someone like me who has very narrow hips, the bigger the stomach, the higher risk I'm going to be. But someone who has a pear shape that has very wide hips, and even if we had the same measurement in the abdominals, they're going to have a better waist to hip ratio than me because their waist or their hips are bigger. And therefore, it's been determined that the more body fat you carry in your midsection is unhealthier than carrying more body fat in your lower body. Okay. And I'm talking about your health risks. I'm not talking about aesthetics or how it looks or feels. Okay. I'm talking about your actual health risk for heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and those kinds of things. Okay. So with that said, the other thing that I want to point out is BMI. All the doctor's offices refer to BMI, that is body mass index. That is nothing more than a scale that says you're 6 foot tall and you weigh 180 pounds. Therefore, you are in high BMI or low BMI. It doesn't take into account whether you have a lot of lean mass or whether you have more body fat. So I don't like to use BMI at all. Matter of fact, I never ever really look it up unless a client asks. I like to go by body composition measures and waist to hip ratio. Okay. Another thing that I want to point out is muscle is more dense than fat. And therefore, what that means, it doesn't mean muscle weighs more than fat. It means that 1 pound of muscle can take up half the space of 1 pound of body fat. Therefore, somebody that is a little smaller than the next person could actually be full of lean mass, and therefore they end up weighing the same. Okay, so just remember that lean mass, muscle, takes up less space than fat. Okay. And so the scale may not change a lot for somebody who's building muscle and losing body fat. That's really important to remember. Um, one more thing that I want to point out is a muscle cell is made up of over 70% water. A fat cell is made up of 23 or less percent water. Therefore, if you have a lot of lean mass or you have a lot of muscle, you want to make sure that you're getting a little bit more than the average water you think you should be getting, okay? Because in order for that muscle cell to work properly, not cramp, and be able to the muscles glide easy, you've got to have enough water flowing through your body, okay, on a regular basis. If your muscle cell is made up of 70+% water, you want to keep flushing the water through you. It will help flush out toxins and keep that muscle cell healthy. Okay, so that's the short of it for body composition. There's so much more information to share, but that's it for today. Any questions though that you have, even if you're just curious about it, just shoot me a message and I will get you the answer.